Hello everyone, this is Malik Davis, and this presentation discusses the military entertainment complex and the origins and effects of the military in gaming. In order to grasp the military entertainment complex, you should begin by discussing the military industrial complex. The military industrial complex was first mentioned by President Dwight D. Eisenhower during his farewell address in 1971, in which he stated, "This conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We must guard against this acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial." The MIC was around prior to his farewell address, of course, but this was his first mentioning in the public sphere on such a grand stage. Let us look at the triangle here to our right. It describes the way in which the MIC operates through this triangle of influence built upon relationships, lobbying, and has profound policy implications. Starting at the top, Congress sends funds and political support to various bureaucracies within the DoD, the Department of Justice, and so on. Those bureaucracies conduct business with interest groups. The profits reaped by those interest groups places them in prime position to conduct successful lobbying efforts that ensures the cycle will continue, each entity serving the other to their mutual benefit. The military entertainment complex, which we will refer to as the MEC, is essentially identical to the MIC. It is the MIC revamped and packaged for 21st century America. The graphic to the left is virtually identical to our previous one. Starting at the top, following the black arrows down to the right, we have the Department of Defense at the top with its newly secured funds from Congress. The various bureaucracies that make up the DoD disperse their tax-funded contracts to military contractors like Lockheed Martin, Intel, and even Epic Games with their Unreal Engine. These military contractors provide the factors of production and employment for scientists, engineers, and specialists in their respective fields. The fruits of their labor and research results in the technologically advanced tools at the disposal of the Department of Defense. Following the blue arrows back down the triangle, the DoD provides feedback on these technologies not yet available to the public. From there, the owners of the technology, which is the contractors, are free to bring their product to market. That leaves them profiting from their status as a military contractor and as the owner of the patents flowing in the free market. In its most simple form, the MEC is the relationship between the military, the entertainment industry, and the tech hardware industry, though that is becoming increasingly rare today. And as we can see here, as they bring their products to public markets, they also reap the rewards, the profits, again, from here, from the public markets, and from the tax-funded contracts supported to them through the DoD. With our conceptualization complete, let us dive into the details. The first video game was created by an American physicist named William Higginbotham. Higginbotham was born on October 25, 1910, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Following his time as a graduate student at Cornell, working as an electronics technician, Higginbotham joined MIT's radiation lab in 1941, where he worked on cathode ray tube displays for radar systems used in the war effort. In 1943, Higginbotham moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico to work on the Manhattan Project. His role was critical. In 1944, he became the head of the lab's electronics group and worked on classified military assignments. He created the bomb's ignition mechanism and the measuring instrument to ensure that the bomb ignited before making contact with the ground. He and his colleagues witnessed the test detonation of the first atomic bomb on July 16, 1945. Less than a month later, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In 1947, Higginbotham took a position at Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York. He was the physics department's chief physician in experimental nuclear electronic instrumentation. Following the events of World War II, Higginbotham became an advocate for nuclear nonproliferation. That is one of the things that attracted him to this position at Brookhaven. In October of 1958, Brookhaven Labs held its annual Visitors Day convention, during which thousands of people would tour the lab. Higginbotham was responsible for creating an exhibit to show off the instrumentation division's work. He wanted to create something fun, and he said in an interview regarding the game that he thought, I quote, "It might liven up the place to have a game that people could play, and which would convey the message that our scientific endeavors have relevancy for society." End quote. Higginbotham's instrumentation group had a small analog computer that could display various curves, including the path of a bouncing ball on an oscilloscope. It did not take Higginbotham long to conceive of the idea of a tennis game. Having worked on displays for radar systems and many other electronics, including the atomic bomb, Higginbotham had no trouble designing something that seemed so simple to him. It took about 2 weeks for his team to build and debug the device. The first video game was ready for its debut. They called this game Tennis for Two, and it was the first video game. It was a hit, and it quickly became the most popular exhibit at the lab's convention, with people standing in long lines to get a chance to play. Higginbotham created the first video game. However, it is quite plausible that this would not be the case without the help of the government. While at MIT, he worked on government-sponsored projects for the World War II effort. In Los Alamos, his research was obviously funded by the government, as his role was vital with respect to the Manhattan Project. And Brookhaven National Laboratory is one of the 10 national laboratories overseen and primarily funded by the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Science. So, though arguably indirect, the military was vital to the creation of the first video game. The creator made a career out of working for government labs and government-sponsored endeavors. Moving forward, we now look at the expressive power of video games, which are by definition also simulations. To further elucidate this power to express, we will look at Black Hawk Down through 3 different narratives: the book, the movie, and the video game. All 3 narratives have a relationship to a historical development that took place in Somalia during their civil war between 1992 and 1995. There were a series of confrontations between local militia and the United Nations multinational military force that was stationed there. The most well-known of these confrontations is known as the Battle of Mogadishu, which happened between the 3rd and the 4th of October in 1993. The details of the battle are beyond the scope of this presentation, but are discussed in great detail in an article by Johan Hoagland and Martin Wilander titled Black Hawk Down, Adaptation and the Military Entertainment Complex. For us here, we'll be focused on the mode of interaction between the narrative and the person interacting with that narrative. For the book, one's mode of interaction is merely reading it. For a movie, one's mode of interaction is watching, reading, whether that be subtitles or assets within the film, and of course listening to the sounds and reverberations of the film. The video game, on the other hand, has many more modes of interaction, which empirically increases your immersion with that content. It also creates more opportunities to influence, and the mere modes of interaction accompanying a video game relegates the user to a student, someone who is being taught the do's and don'ts of the virtual world in which they roam. And also, they are being primed to act accordingly to those rules of the virtual world. This is occurring with or without the user being conscious of it. In a book, you read of killing and death. In a film, you see and hear it. In a video game, you plan it, you set up the steps to enact it, and then you do it. You are no longer a bystander in the action. You are the actor conducting the action to the specifications of the mechanics that govern the game. Whereas Black Hawk Down really elucidates the immersion potential of video games, Ian Bogus brings legitimacy to the critical study of gaming as a form of rhetoric. In his book, Persuasive Games, The Expressive Power of Video Games, Bogus coins the term procedural rhetoric. Breaking down the term into its two independent parts, rhetoric is the art of speaking or writing effectively, such as the studying of writing or speaking as a means of communication or persuasion. That is according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary. And the procedural part refers to the uncanny medium through which the rhetoric is carried. And I'll use a quote from Bogus to elucidate this claim. I quote, through rule-based representations and interactions rather than the spoken word, writing, images, or moving pictures, end quote. That is how Bogus refers to the quote-unquote procedural and procedural rhetoric. In other words, procedural rhetoric refers to the mechanics that govern the actions within the game's virtual world, and also taking it a step further in questioning the why behind those mechanics. What are the mechanics of the game? What are they trying to get the user to accomplish? And why is it relevant for the user to do so? Graphical skin, on the other hand, can be thought of as a visual rhetoric. It is what the user sees, which can have a profound impact on the rhetoric of the game in totality. Bogus provides a powerful anecdote in his book, Persuasive Games, that elucidates the importance of graphical skins to the gaming experience. He uses a quote from the game designer Ralph Koster using Tetris as his subject, and I quote, you are the player dropping innocent victims down into the gas chamber, and they come in all shapes and sizes. There are old ones and young ones, fat ones and tall ones. As they fall into the bottom, they grab onto each other and try to form human pyramids to get to the top of the well. Should they manage to get out, the game is over and you lose. But if you pack them in tightly enough, the ones at the bottom succumb to the gas and die. End quote. That is powerful imagery, and moving forward, our next two examples will build upon that. ID Software's Doom was officially released in its entirety on December 10th, 1993. The game was astronomically successful, and virtually all modern FPS titles like Overwatch, Call of Duty, and Halo can trace their lineage back to this one groundbreaking title. In a general press release put out by Doom's publishers in 1993, they gave their thoughts on the game's setting, and I quote, you are one of 4 off-duty soldiers suddenly thrown into the middle of an interdimensional war. Wave after wave of demonic creatures spread through the research base where you're stationed. You must eradicate the enemy and find out the truth. Your sense of reality may be shattered. Later episodes feature a journey into another dimension filled to its hellish horizon with fire and flesh. Decide the fate of the two universes as you battle to survive. Succeed, and you will be humanity's heroes. Fail, and you will spell its doom. End quote. Doom was truly ahead of its time graphically. It set the pace for FPS games for decades to come. It featured fully textured and mapped walls, floors, and ceilings. It had state-of-the-art light sourcing and draw dimensions, and it featured detailed 3D environments, realistic weapon physics, and character animations. It was also internet-enabled, allowing users to play and communicate together on separate devices. The game was modular and open-sourced. This meant that the users with source code could manipulate levels and assets within the game, creating all new game modes, missions, scenarios, and characters. This was the birth of the team deathmatch that is all over FPS titles today. This game was truly mind-bending for the time. The technology that enabled its development results from the procurement policies implemented by the DoD throughout the 20th century. Such processes of procurement saw the computer industry take off as wartime technologies began proliferating in the open markets. Think back to that iron triangle of influence regarding the MEC that we discussed earlier. The features of this game, combined with the stifling budgetary constraints faced by the Marine Corps, led us to our next topic, and that is Marine Doom. Marine Doom was a modded version of ID Software's Doom. A group of Marine simulation experts from the Marine Corps' Modeling and Simulation Management Office in the Training and Education Division at Quantico, Virginia, tracked down a shareware copy of the commercial game Doom. They did this under the direction of then Marine Corps Commandant General Charles C. Krulak, who once stated, I quote, "It is my intent that we reach the stage where Marines come to work and spend part of each day talking about warfighting, learning to think, making decisions, and being exposed to tactical and operational issues." He continued, stating, "The use of technological innovations such as personal computer-based war games provide great potential for Marines to develop decision-making skills, particularly when live training time and opportunities are limited. Policy contained herein authorizes Marines to use government computers for approved PC-based war games." End quote. Their motivations for Marine Doom began with money. Simulation is cheaper than reality. Their use cases, as General Krulak stated, were to assist in the mental development of the Marines, such as their decision-making skills, communication, and familiarity with the chain of command. The Marines also modded the graphical skin. The fantastical environments were replaced with real-world images and locations that were scanned into the game's graphics engine. Sci-fi weaponry was replaced by the Marines' M16 rifle, the M249 machine gun, and M67 frag grenades, and so on. The hellish monsters were replaced by the 3D scans of G.I. Joe action figures. The environments now included elements from the fog of war, such as fighting holes, bunkers, tactical wires, and friendly fire. As you can guess, this greatly impacted the game's procedural rhetoric. Before, you were a sci-fi marine fighting otherworldly creatures on a faraway planet. Now, you are an actual American Marine fighting through a 3D simulated version of some American embassy, stepping over enemy soldiers as you give your subordinates commands regarding y'all's next move. Mowing down enemies with M16 and M249 machine guns, making your way to the embassy gates. This is far from the original Doom, because this was now Marine Doom. And it was available to virtually everyone. Users needed only to purchase version 1.9 of the commercial game and add the Marine rewrite code to run the new tactical simulation. Any personal computer owner of Doom 2 could download the code for Marine Doom from the Modeling Simulation Management Office's webpage. Anyone could become a military assault commando. Marine Doom was free, and it can still be found online till this day. Less than a decade later, on Independence Day 2002, the United States Army released their own video game titled America's Army. Yes, the military had already participated in video game development with Marine Doom. However, Marine Doom was merely a modded version of another game. On the other hand, America's Army was a game funded, developed, and published by the United States Army. The game was designed by MOVES, which is an acronym for the Modeling, Simulation, and Virtual Environments Institute of the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. The game was intended to be a recruiting device. It was available for free on the internet and still is until May 5th, when the service will be shut down after 20 plus years of activity. It produced brilliant graphics and had the most advanced commercial game engine available, the Unreal Engine. Its development costs were about $8 million in 1993, which will be around $16 million today. America's Army was only planned to be a 7-year project, but its effectiveness in recruiting and general popularity saw the DoD continue its funding for more than 2 decades. A 2008 study conducted by MIT found that 30% of all Americans ages 16 to 24 had a more positive impression of the Army because of that game. And even more amazingly, the game had more impact on recruits than all other forms of Army advertising combined. Millions have played America's Army, and if you're viewing this before May 5th, 2022, you can Google America's Army and download it for free yourself. The game was officially conceived by Colonel Casey Wardynski, the U.S. Army's chief economist, in 1999. In an interview with the Washington Post in 2005, the colonel made a statement about the game, and I quote, "It's designed to give players an inside view of the very fundamentals of being a soldier, and it's also designed to give them a sense of self-efficacy, that they can do it." End quote. For an American teen contemplating joining the Army, I am sure access to this video game would assist in persuading the user to take the next step. America's Army was played by over 20 million plus players, and as I mentioned, has been available for 2+ decades. In closing, we briefly discussed the origins of the MEC and the first video game. We explored narratives through different mediums alongside the procedural and graphical rhetoric that accompanies games. We took a look at the world's grandfather of first-person shooter titles, Doom, and how the military used that platform to birth their gaming lineage. The military followed up on Marine Doom with a game developed and funded in-house, cleverly titled America's Army. The arms of the American government have a vast influence on gaming today, just as they had a vast influence on gaming at its inception. The creator of the first video game worked on government-sponsored endeavors his entire career. The military created the conditions for a society all too familiar with war and the basic mechanics of waging, participating, and facilitating war. Today, there are a myriad of FPS titles striving for a visually authentic military experience, from Call of Duty, Battlefield, Medal of Honor, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Tom Clancy's Rainbow series, and the list goes on. Though the U.S. Army is dropping support for America's Army servers, they are far from done with their work in gaming. The U.S. Army has its own esports team dedicated to gaming. This is a massive recruiting tool. They also stream their gameplay on popular services like Twitch and have come under scrutiny for their appeal to underage youth. We are moving closer and closer to the future of warfare, an age where war is waged by drones controlled by users on the other side of the globe. This is the reality in which we currently reside, and it will continue to grow. The military will be ready. They are leaving no stone unturned. Their recruitment of the future soldier and the military entertainment complex and gaming are truly just getting started.